Welcome to the Future Trends Forum. My name is Brian Alexander. I'm the forum's creator, host, and chief cat herder. And today we're going to be exploring a very interesting and unusual project called codename FOECast. So before we begin, let's just go through the background about how the forum came to be, how it works, who supports it, and then we'll start talking. So to begin with, let me just remind you that the forum spun out as the discussion-based, video-based, conversation-based project out of the Future Trends in Technology and Education report. FTTE is a monthly report, a trends analysis that looks at technology and education. It's been doing this for years, tracking about 86 different trends. So we have a good database of trends over time, so we can extrapolate them forward to get a better sense of where they might be taking us. If you haven't seen it before, go to ftte.us, download some sample copies, and subscribe. Now, another part about this is that the Future Trends Forum and FTTE and a few other projects are part of an umbrella called the Future of Education Project or the Future of Education Observatory. This is a multimedia, participatory, social, open, and ongoing exploration of where education and technology are headed. So that includes the FTT report, it includes this discussion. It also includes a bookstore, it includes a book club, it includes a blog, and more projects coming down the pike. The goal is to have as many different probes forward into the future to try and give us a better sense of where education and technology are headed. If you haven't seen it, go to futureofeducation.us and you can find out more information. Now, another thing about all this work is that it is truly transnational. We really want to make sure that when we look at the future of education, that we look from as many different perspectives as possible. Here from this visual that we've had participants from all over the world. And actually, I need to update the map because we've had participants from every continent so far. So just think when you're trying to imagine where learning management systems or pedagogy or economics or demographics could be taking us, that's really important not to focus in a narrow country or region, but to think globally with as many different nations as possible. Now, how we can do all this work is in part based on generous support from a few different sources, and I want to thank them and explain how they work. So, to begin with, we really are grateful to NYSERDNet in New York State. That's a nonprofit that works with that state's colleges, museums, libraries, and other institutions to get them onto high speed broadband. They've been very generous in their support, and we're very grateful to them. We're also very grateful to Shindig because Shindig makes available this technology we're using. So, let me explain and let me walk you through it if you're new to it or if you haven't had a chance to see it before. Here are a few different parts. Where I am right now and where this slide is just for a minute is called the stage. Everybody on the call, everybody in the video conference can see and hear us. So it's just like a stage in a lecture hall or in a studio. Now, below us is everybody else. What I think of as the participant swarm. And if you look around, you can see there are about 50 people broken out into three different rooms. So if I look down right now, I can see Mark Corbett Wilson, I can see Nate Angel, I can see Christina DeGangi, I can see Susie McGee Mazenga. I mean, a whole ton of people. And if you want to talk to one of those people, one way of doing it is just to click on their cursor twice. If they want to talk to you, your two icons will click together like a pair of Legos and have your own private audiovisual bubble, which is pretty neat. Now, I'm talking about conversation because the whole idea of the forum is to encourage conversation through this technology. So there are actually three other ways you can do that. And I want to show them how they work, and I want to encourage you to use all of them as to whatever extent you feel really comfortable. So look at the very bottom of the screen. There's a white strip running along it with a few different icons, and that's really key. On the leftmost edge, you'll see a number. Right now I have 52 with some heads on it. If you click that, up will pop a film strip of all the participants who are there. And 52 is the number of people who are involved in this video conference. So you can scroll through there just to see where everybody is and who they are. There's Renee Francois, there's Jonathan Kornberg, and so on. So that's one way to find people, which is pretty handy, I think. Now, directly next to that icon is the text chat box. It looks like a little dialogue box for a comic strip. If you click that, you get the chance to do a text chat with the nearest 18 or so people who come in with you. So right now I've got Matthew Winslow, Laurie Williams, Fred Bashirs, Christine DeGangi, Terry Dwyer, JCI, Kim Haney, Jim Holton, Vanessa Vale, Mark Howard Wilson, Kimberly Scott, Susie Mazenga, Kate Borowski, and Nate Angel, along with Kay Berry, Ted Newcomb, Jonathan Corver, Brenda, Tara, Roxanne Riskin. So I can chat with them and they can chat with me. We can have conversations, ask questions back and forth. So that's a pretty common way to do it. That can work. Now, next to that on the white strip, you'll see a question mark in a circle. Now, if you click that, you'll be able to type in a question or a comment. Now, that doesn't go to the 18 or so people next to you. That goes to me. So I can flash that on the screen and then read it out loud. So if you have a question or a comment, type it in there and we can flash it. It's very, very easy to do. Now, if your mic and camera are working and you're in a spot like where I'm now, where you can talk freely, click the raised hand icon. And this is the best part because then we can teleport you up to the stage. So I can get rid of this slide and put you and your smiling face up here instead. In fact, we can have up to 4 people appear at a time. So you can think of it as a kind of mini panel, or actually a panel. So if you have a question or comment, your mic and camera are working, you feel like you can talk, click it. We'll beam you up, and away we go. It's easier to do. It takes less time to do than it did for me to explain. So raising your hand, clicking the ask button, using the chat box are all kinds of ways for you to participate. And that's the whole idea. What I'm doing now, talking at you, I'm going to stop doing that in just a minute. But the technology makes this work. Please take advantage of it. And please let me thank Shindig for making it available to us. Now, when I say us, there's another group I want to thank, which is the nearly 100 supporters on Patreon. If you don't know Patreon, Patreon is a crowdfunding site like Kickstarter or GoFundMe, where people can support with micro amounts, I mean, as little as $1, a creative person they like. In this case, the creative person is, well, me and my project of the future of education and technology. So you can see now dozens and dozens of people have been contributing just a little bit every month just to keep the lights on, the machines running, and to keep this whole operation moving forward. You can see there some of the biggest donors: Michael Haggins, Janae Kim Han, Paul McConaughey, Kyle Johnson, Bob Johnson, Robin DeRosa, Michael Slade, Chris Lott. Really, really grateful to all of them. So if you haven't had a chance to go to patreon.com/Brian Alexander, find out more. And if you can, kick in a little bit just to keep everything going. We're really grateful to our friends in Patreon. Thank you. Now, that's how the technology works. That's where all this project came from. That's what we'd like to accomplish. What are we going to accomplish today? Today, we're going to accomplish a conversation about codename FOECast. Now, if you don't know what FOECast is, let me give you a quick explanation. But before I do that, let me say that today I'm not going to present. We don't have one particular guest who is the genius of FOECast. This is a collaborative effort. So we have a bunch of different people who are already here now. And we're going to invite them up one by one to talk and bash this around. So let me just ask, in your chat box, if you've already been fiddling around with Project FOECast, with codename FOECast, say a word about it in your chat box. If you don't know what it is, say that too. Like, what the heck is FOECast? That's fine. Put that in. And if you've been doing something with it, say what you've been doing. I've entered something in the Google Doc. I've blogged away. Go ahead. Take a minute to do that. I should type in myself. I've been organizing and writing a lot. Oh, Clark, let me look for that while everyone's writing. We need a sound effect for extremely busy typing. And that's probably going to be something like a beehive going. So we have Susie Mazenga. Matthew Winslow is new. Hello, Matthew. Explain it all in English in just a second. Nate's aware of it. Hasn't looked into it yet. Clark's writing in the Google Doc. Let me find that passage, Clark. Phil's been participating in the Google Doc, asking some really, really good questions. Clark, I found a passage from you about the value horizon bringing new ideas to people who weren't in the loop. Does that sound right? Yeah, I'll paste that in the chat box. See if you can find that, Clark. All right. And we have Kara who would like to get involved. We'll explain how. Oh, sure, Nate. Let me just pop the link in the chat box. In fact, we've got a bunch of links going to pop up. So here is the chat. Here is the Google Doc. And Clark, I found a second one. I'll put that in the chat box. Oh, Mark, good. Thank you for posting a comment in the blog. And Clark, you were just a demon on this. You have a ton of stuff. All right. Well, this is good. This gives me a quick sense of where things are. Now, um, let me just say, first of all, to everyone who's participating, thank you. It's a lot of fun. It's very exciting. And those who haven't participated, let me explain where this comes from. And to help explain it, um, let's see if we can bring on a couple of the people who are the hyperactivists in this. So let's see if we can find someone like Tom Hames, for example, who's a dynamo on this, or if we want to bring up Mark Corbett Wilson. Mark, if your bandwidth will allow part of this, um, and we can bring in Veronica Armour or Roxanne Riskin, people who are really just getting into it. Hello, Tom. Is it raining down there in Texas?
Hello. No, actually, for the first time in weeks, there's not a cloud in the sky. It's very strange.
Fantastic. Wow.
Oh,
Well,
here in
I enjoy that.
Oakland.
I look forward to seeing your photographs. Mark, does your audio work? Can you speak?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can. It's so good to hear you. Thank you for coming. And we'll have Roxanne pop up to join us in just a second. So let me give you all a quick background, and then I want to hear from Roxanne and Tom and Mark what they've been saying. FOECast is an unusual project. The goal is to try to create plans and proposals for a new future of education technology research project. And we're inspired by the late Horizon report from the New Media Consortium. We're inspired by other projects as well. And the idea is to create something new. We want to take advantage of 2018 to produce something that looks future forward, not just in its content, but also in its form. And for the past 2 months, a fine group of people like Maya Gorgeva, Ruben Puentedura, Phil Long, Paul Signorelli, Lisa Magura, Taylor Kendall, Jonathan Nalder, Tom Hames have been just contributing a lot of thoughts, a lot of energy, and a lot of time to thinking about this. The idea is to take a few months to involve as many people as possible to end up with a proposal or a project for something new, to make something that doesn't exist right now. And so this week, as part of that drive, we took a full week, designed it as a design thinking exercise so that we could try to create as many ideas as possible what that could be like. So we structured this pretty carefully. On Monday, we put out the query, what was the value of the Horizon Report? What did you get out of it? What did it mean to you that we can try and recapture and recapitulate? On Tuesday, we asked, what kind of forecasting methods do you think are most valuable or should we explore? Then on Wednesday, we narrowed it down a little bit and said, all right, now we're thinking about these methods and values. What kind of shape should it take? What kind of housing should it occupy? And today, we've been discussing that bane of project management everywhere, scope. What should be in this project and what should we exclude from this project? Now, that's given us a frantic amount of ideas, and it has been occurring all over the place. When I say we've been asking, people have been talking. Partly it's on Twitter using hashtag FOECast. Partly it's on several blogs. Mine, Tom's been writing some as well. Partly on a new site, FOECast.net. Partly through a series of video conferences, like this one right now. And partly, we just did a poll asking people what your favorite forecasting tools are, and we got back a really, really interesting set of results. A key thing that's been really driving this has been a Google Doc, which has just been huge. Right now, it's something like, I've lost track of how many pages, but it's pretty enormous at this stage. It's like a small book right now, 7,500 words of ideas about where we could be going with education technology and what kind of project we could build. So tell me, Roxanne, Tom, Mark, what have I missed? What are your perceptions of what FOECast has been like?
Well, I could say, whoops, let me unmute sorry.
You're fine. You're fine.
Let me say that it's bringing together a community of professionals. So it's really a professionals of the practice. So we could think of that as maybe a starting point, and then there's just so many ways to go with this because we're defining again who the audience is and then onboarding people that and educators and non-educators in different groups that we're not really considering part of the future that need to be.
Yes, yes. Well, they're two great points. This is definitely a community effort involving more than 100 people, and it really we have to shape our audience and meet the audience. Thank you so much. Um, let's see if we can hear from Mark. Mark, is your mic working? What do you think? What have you been seeing?
Well, I'm as a student, I bring a different perspective,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, and as an old retired person, also. So I'm interested in the future of education, but unfortunately, because my experience was less than optimal, so I'm interested in reshaping education. And I have the good fortune to be working with a small research institute in Berkeley as they transition into an accredited online institution. So all of my interests are in the future. I'm not a professional educator, but I'm interested in expanding the technology to all adult learners, whether they're affiliated with an institution or not. That's my particular interest. And I did post comments on Tom's blog this morning. Thanks for writing that, Tom. That was really helpful to lay it out that way. And I just added some of my experience in Silicon Valley, working in organizations without hierarchies, without management, and express my hope that FOECast could adopt a particular model that I'm attracted to, that is voluntary. It's a voluntary association model, but yet there
Mm-hmm.
is accountability and responsibility built into it through letters of understanding between the participants. So you can read more about that on Tom's blog.
Oh, excellent, excellent. I'm going to quickly share that on the one of the chat rooms, and that's also linked from my blog post today. Thank you, Mark. Your perspective is so vital. If I connect what you said to what Roxanne was just saying, that there's communities involved here. So many different overlapping populations: instructional designers, students, and even people in architecture firms like Tom Ames. Tom, what have you seen of FOECast so far?
Well, I consider myself an innovation architect rather than an architect of any sort because I'm not an architect. But um, I look at innovation as facilitating the innovation of others and spreading good ideas and thinking really hard about structures that allow that to happen. And one of the other things that I think is really key is that every other profession have experience with that we know personally, EDUCAUSE, any of the other ones that have been around for 10 or 20 years,
Mhm.
come out of an industrial mindset. I mean, they're based fundamentally at some level on physical meetings, print publications, and while they may have shed some of that over the years, their basic structure grows from that. And I think the NMC occasionally tried to go beyond that paradigm a bit, but was always kind of, again, tied into its existing structure. It had the advantage that it didn't have, I guess, a print publication or set of publications like EDUCAUSE that it had to keep up with or felt tied to. But at the end of the day, it was still based around the conference, the Horizon Report, and other things like that, which were physical entities. I'm not saying we get rid of those sorts of things, but if we start at it from the other side and say, okay, well, what's the first thing we need to think about? And that's the community. And how can we use technology to work backwards from that community to create sets of tools for that community and ways that community can create sets of tools for people who are not direct members of the community? And how do we leverage technology to do those sorts of things? I think that's a really important, the first post-industrial professional organization. It would be pretty cool.
Wow.
The
Wow.
the other thing is the ideas that we can pull out of Silicon Valley and some of the other places where elements of this already exist, and how can we create things cheaply and easily. Again, I'm a big proponent of the lean startup methodology, which, and not every aspect of it, but the key feature of it that I think it argues is that with technology, again, we can create things very cheaply and easily. I mean, imagine for a moment, we've got 51 people here, what it would cost to fly all those people into a single space and talk and all those sorts of things. And yet we're interacting relatively seamlessly at this point. Again, most of the time, these kinds of gatherings are seen as an addendum to a larger physical space. And if we go backwards again in technology, how do we, again, those the little cheap stuff that doesn't really cost any money. We don't need thousands and thousands of dollars to stand up this organization. Just need time. Of course, that's a commodity too.
It is, but this is. Just want to grab that. The first post-industrial professional organization. Okay, people who are wondering what the heck is this FOECast? What you just heard from all of these people, we've created a possibility space. We're opening up a space for us to brainstorm something new. So FOECast is that kind of ideation zone right now. We've ripped open and set up a spot where we can have this kind of conversation and dream big. FOECast is a process at the end of which we will have at least one plan and prototype, probably more, for where we go next. That's a quick answer. It sounds kind of ambitious or vague or goofy, but in order to get away from ambitious and vague and goofy, at least, Veronica, you've been contributing maniacally to the Google Doc. You've been adding a lot of great stuff. Why don't you tell us what you've been seeing and what you've been thinking?
Well, what I've been seeing is something, that I found really interesting in how the collaboration is going. I started reading the NMC Horizon report a couple of years ago on the recommendation of my director, and I really got into it. And I'm, just an instructional designer. I don't have any additional things to my title. I'm just a mid-level cog in the higher education industry. And I always saw what was happening with the Horizon report and going, wow, these people have such great ideas, and how do they know all this, and where are they getting all this information? And then as I started to find ways to get more involved in the community, I realized I wanted to do just that. I wanted to give back to the community more. I didn't want to just be an instructional designer that just, goes through rote things, but wanted to be able to contribute what I was learning as well. And just through staying involved, having been able to be part of this collaboration has meant a lot to me, because it's not necessarily something that, you get the opportunity to be in your own institution for good reason. You have, your directors and your, senior leadership for a reason. But this has been a nice way to connect with other people and hear what they're saying. And I feel like I'm seeing that in the Google Doc, is that you have a lot of people from a lot of different levels in education being able to contribute and give their voice. And it's not just higher ed, it's K-12, it's industry, and in showing and being able to see how we are all interconnected and our decisions and what we do impact each other, and that we do need to be cognizant of how we are, what research we do and what we consider trends. We need to be thinking about our students beyond K-12, beyond higher ed, career skills, and that lifelong learning thing, and being able to find a way to be relevant to all of them. Not saying that we're always going to please everybody or always have the right answer for them, but being able to really be a place of relevance and connection for everyone. So.
That's fantastic. Where are you based? Where are you a cog?
I'm at Seton Hall University. Go Pirates.
Well, good. Thank you so much. And again, what you said just is a theme that's reverberated throughout. Again, Roxanne was talking about this, and everyone's been talking about this. Mark and Tom, this idea, this is a community. This is a network of networks. Lots and lots of conversations have been happening. I'm really grateful, Veronica, for your participation in that. While we have eager participants like Roxanne and Tom and Veronica up on stage, and we have others waiting in the wings and in the audience, let me just mention one probe. The prompt for today is to try and scope out the project, that is in project management terms, to figure out what we'd like to have in a project. So for example, would we want to make a project that's about the future of education and technology in higher ed in the Northern Hemisphere, for example, but not not K through 12, not the Southern, or whatever. I mean, some kind of scoping in or out. So I would like to give people a chance to talk and think about both of these things. If you have more questions about the FOECast process, this is a great time to ask. But also thinking about what we could shape together. What would you like to scope in, and what would you like to scope out? So I just want to open the floor for everybody to share their thoughts. And again, if you're new to the Shindig environment, there are those 3 different buttons on the bottom of the screen along the white strip. You can click on whichever one you feel most comfortable with. If you're not sure about the video, you can see already we've had, 5 different people up here. It's really easy to come up on stage. So take a minute and think either what questions you have about FOECast or what kind of scope you'd like to see a future project have. And I'm saying this and I haven't checked my chat box, which means that probably someone said something brilliant and I've completely missed it. Yes, Mark Corbett Wilson continues to terrify me with his life. He worked with Paolo Soleri, the Arcosanti project. Oh my God, that's fantastic. Roxanne mentions communities of practice, not just one, but networks and networks of those. And while people are thinking and talking about this, let me ask, Veronica, since we pulled you up here at the last minute, and since you're in New Jersey, there are all these different challenges for you. What kind of scope are you thinking about? Are you thinking about education as a whole? Are you thinking about learning as a whole, or what?
I would say I think about learning as a whole, primarily because it's the effect of my background. I've taught in middle school, I've worked in publishing, and now I'm in higher ed. And so I don't, yeah, I have an interesting career path. And I just see things connected. And I've done work with, local 4-H organizations and seeing what nonprofits do and trying to educate people. And I think we need to look at things as learning and as a whole, because it doesn't stop. When you're 22 and you finish your bachelor's, it doesn't stop. Once you finish your terminal degree, there's always ways that we can improve learning and improve how we engage people with things. And I think we could be of benefit to more than just the education community, libraries, museums, nonprofits, and helping them spread their message and the ways that they connect with people with new trends, in that sense. So I think I'd like to see the scope be, extremely broad, though that has with it its own complications, because, I see a value for it, but nonprofit organization might not even know about it or even care, even if they did, because they're so small and wouldn't necessarily have always a director of education to take interest in it. So, I'd love to see broad learning as the scope, but perhaps education might be more realistic to start, just, K-16 or something like that.
Let me just, besides nodding vigorously, let me just explain or expand the one thing that Veronica said, one jewel in her string of jewels or comments. When we're talking about education versus learning, this came up in a few different locations over this week. The idea that if we focus on education per se, that means we're going to emphasize schooling. So we're going to emphasize instruction, instructors, pedagogy, curricula, standards, and so on. If we emphasize learning, then we're thinking about learning wherever it occurs. So as you said, Veronica, in your own life, in 4-H club, in middle school, in publishing, in the private sector, public sector, wherever it happens. So I mean, those are two. It sounds subtle, but you're really talking about two completely different viewpoints on everything. So I want to make sure we've got that. In my chat box, sorry, I can only see the 18 people who are coming near me. We've had Susie calling for global independent learning, which is a great point. We've had a lot of people who are independent scholars, independent learners who really want to play a role. Clark chimes in with more learning, including informal organizational learning. And Phil starts to scope us down just a touch. He wants us to look broadly across fields and countries, but with an eye towards practical application to U.S. higher education. Understood. How about the rest of you? What questions do you have? What comments do you have, either about the scope or about what the heck this FOECast project is? I hope it's a little bit more clear, but we'd love to hear more comments and thoughts.
So one of the things that I also want to emphasize is that in a post-industrial world, these barriers, these specializations, K-12 versus higher ed, English versus history versus math, they all start to crumble. And if we don't recognize that reality, we're not moving beyond a lot of the, again, shackles that the current educational system has, in the sense of an overemphasis on specialization and a downright, I would argue, denigration of interdisciplinary efforts because they don't fit within neat boxes. The industrial world is one of boxes. The post-industrial world is one of a lack of boxes, and I think we're just now coming to grips with that reality in a lot of fora. And I certainly think that, yeah, I mean, the idea of learning writ large is certainly a good scoping mission. I'm a little concerned about U.S. versus the rest of the world. I mean, we've had a lot of calls for internationalization of the efforts. I proposed in the blog that I wrote yesterday that, local organizations be allowed to emerge and iterate themselves and then contribute to a larger framework that we then share out. The next great revolution in higher education might come from Johannesburg or Mumbai or Kazakhstan. We just don't know. So if we close those avenues out, we're liable to miss something important. And I don't think the U.S. has been recently funding its educational system, so there's that issue as well. So who knows?
Let me just.
I don't know if Ruben's somewhere out there or not, but he knows these international contexts as well as anybody.
Oh yeah. Well, let me just first let me thank Tom.
Yeah.
Friends, Tom has been just a dino behind this. He's been participating, contributing like mad, writing blog posts, helping us plan and organize, devoting an awful lot of time. I'm really grateful to Tom for doing that. And so, two things of what Tom just said, and then I want to welcome Kelly. One part is the international aspect. We've been trying to organize FOECast as transnationally as possible. We have people from multiple countries in our kind of organizational cloud. And this week, we designed it to attract and make it possible as many people's involvement as we really can be done. So, for example, we've had video conferences scheduled across the clock. So this one today is 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We've had one at 10 a.m. We had another one at 7 p.m. So we try to get the live thing going as much as possible. And then we've had the asynchronous channels, everything from Slack to Google Docs, to try and really allow that to happen. That's hard. Most higher education discussions are very national or regionally based. So we're really pushing on that. The second thing, if I could, Tom, Tom and Taylor and a few other great people here have been really emphasizing creativity structure. So insofar as I've been talking today, I've been talking about the shape of a product, whatever we make, if it's a document or a game or a simulation, whatever. But there's also the team that builds it, the organization that creates it. And I think it's vital what you just said, Tom, that we have to keep in mind that education and learning are changing rapidly, and the organization has to change to account for that. Kelly Walsh, welcome. Where are you coming at us from today?
From New York, Brian. Can you hear me okay?
I can. The skies look blue. Is that because they're frozen solid?
No, it's just the funny aspect of my windows seem to always have this tint where it looks beautiful outside, even though it's rather dreary, actually.
That's a nice window. There's a metaphor for us all.
Yeah,
If
right.
you don't know Kelly, friends, this is a really, really enjoyed person. He's done a lot of work in education and technology. Among other things, he is a great resource about flipped classrooms and blended learning. So if you want to look into that or use that, please tap Kelly because he's got tons and tons of knowledge about that. So Kelly, what's on your mind? What are you thinking about? FOECast or about our scope or what?
Yeah, building on this idea of the scope and what Tom was saying, I'm a big fan of the idea of disaggregating the degree. So the Lumina Foundation and Connecting Credentials effort have been doing a lot of work about designing a framework that says, how can we get better at allowing all these kind of micro credentials to plug into each other? And I love the idea of the custom build it yourself degree being a reality someday in the future. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Although at the same time, to your point, that concept, I think we're beginning to see that concept can actually become a reality. But where it starts to get particularly challenging is when you bring back the regional aspect, right? So how does that exist outside of regional structures?
Oh, that's a great point. Thank you. And that's by the way, Mark Corbett Wilson. If you don't know Kelly, you guys should definitely coincide. You have a lot in common. Along these lines, please stick around for a minute, Kelly. I'm really glad you're here. We had a few more comments that just popped in. Nate Angel reminds us that there's a vibrant education community at Creative Commons. So that's a really interesting example of what might be a post-industrial association organization to either be inspired by or to work with. Thank you for that. And he shared a good URL about that. So it may be that we get to work with them or inspire them. Gordon Dalby mentioned, great comment. I just need to read this out loud because this is really, really detailed. If not a focus on the potential impacts of technology to move education forward soon and for a lifetime, then with potential of trends to impact the next 30 years. For example, a push for spatialization with fewer liberal arts feeding the mind. Is education destined to be just about earnings? And that's usually really, really deep questions. And that's a very different question from what happens to the LMS, say, which is a very important question. What Gordon's asking is maybe the philosophy of higher education, as we're talking about for the past few weeks with Ricky, or is it about the and purpose of higher education? Thank you very much, Gordon. Gordon, if you want to join us on stage, please let us know. I'd love to hear more. Let's see. Just to remind everybody, if you haven't had a chance to ask a question with the bottom of the screen, that's the little icon that looks like a question mark with a circle around it. So again, thinking about where this could go, we'd like to see from a project about the future of education technology. I'm asking that, thinking about the conversations we've had so far. We've had people who suggest that they really, really like the idea of what one person called looking at the Earth from space, being able to see the huge picture of lots of information. And we've had smaller ones. People say, I want to see an individual project. Heather asks a really good question. Is anyone looking at blockchain for credentialing? And yes, there are a few different projects. The country of Malta, its education ministry, is looking into this. MIT degrees backed by blockchain. And a few weeks ago, we had the head of a really, really great project, Learning Machine, how he was setting up blockchains for his credentials were first for terminal degrees, or I'm sorry, for degrees themselves. The idea was then to go back to what Kelly was talking about, having stackable credentials and disaggregating that and having smaller ones there. That's a really, really important thing to have. So thank you. By the way, if you haven't been here before, what she just did was she asked a question, so we had that flash on the screen so you guys could all see it. So tell me more. Where else would you like this to go? What would you like to see from such a project? Oh, we have Julie Uranus, or Uranus, who says, Southern New Hampshire University is working with Learning Machine. Speaking of which, they just presented the IMS global event yesterday on blockchain and credentials. Fantastic. Southern New Hampshire does a lot of great work, Julie. It's very, very important to bring them in. And can you say if their presentation went well? I mean, did they say they were successful? That would be good to know. So people are interested in specific technologies and practices. They're interested in disaggregation. We're interested in blockchain. Back in one chat room, Nate Angel says he wants us to focus on human practices rather than technologies, which is really, really good. So perhaps that would include something like blended learning, which is not about a particular technology per se, but about the idea of combining different practices and technologies. Nate, if I'm misreading you, please say a bit more. I'll give everybody a minute more to type because I'm sure there's keyboards clacking and people that have more questions. And while you're thinking about that, by the way, if what we're doing with FOECast isn't clear yet, please ask questions. Don't at all be embarrassed if you have a basic question like, where'd the name come from? Or who's involved? Or how do I join? Or should I be afraid of it and learn Homeland Security? Please fire away. All those questions are fair game. We have another comment.
Brian?
Yes, Tom, please go ahead.
I posted a question in the chat room, but I mean, I know there were a number of people who suggested blockchain. I'd like to hear. I'm a little confused about where that would apply. in this particular instance, and so I wouldn't mind hearing somebody give us a spiel as to what how they think blockchain might fit into this effort specifically.
Oh, it's a good thought. It's a good thought. So on the one hand, let's ask. So those of you who are interested in thinking about blockchain, on the one hand, we could think about it as a technology to study, track, and forecast. Will this be something large? How will it impact education, and so on? The other is, can we use this? For example, an idea I've been flirting with, just the idea, is what if FOECast ends up, say, creating a series of forecasts. We think these things are likely to happen, that kind of thing. Publish those to blockchain so that they can be semi-permanent, one to see. And then we can come back to that and check to see how they're doing and how they played out. The rest of you, do you think about, do you see blockchain playing a role in either of those ways as an object of study and forecasting or as a structural tool? Todd, you just appeared and you've got your wonderful background. Did you want to speak to that or do you want to chime in with something else? Either way, we'd be glad to hear from you.
I got something else. I honestly, I don't even know what blockchain is. So
that's okay.
That's how advanced I am.
You're like 95% of the world. And there's a joke in the Bitcoin world, which is if you think you know what blockchain is, you don't. But what are you thinking about? What's on your mind?
So, at the risk of sounding completely ridiculous, here's my 2 cents. We were talking earlier, and there were a few people mentioned this notion of community. So here we are. This is us. We are in a community. This is good. And we know these exist, right? Whether they're Google Hangouts or some university has Zoom and they connect in some way with these other people. I guess what I would like to see is, rather than a vision of the production of a pamphlet or the Horizon report as a PDF or a book, maybe an accompanying conference, is something that looks and feels more like what I have experienced with the DS-106 community, which is a kind of a loose organization of educators and students that over about the last 10 years has just blossomed into a massive community with all kinds of people doing all kinds of work. And I guess my one suggestion would be is that maybe we need to think of kind of the web architects and community architects and let those people come together and choreograph or be responsible for creating the space that we can begin to have as kind of the focal point of some events, right? And it's kind of weird because I've been in so many interesting, Lisa Lane's program for online teaching, DS-106, and other smaller groups like this. But they're all disconnected, which isn't a bad thing. And maybe that's a good chunk of what we need to realize is that we're trying to make a single PowerPoint presentation or a single book. That isn't a bunch of that's not what the future is. As Mark said earlier, it's not a box or a PDF file anymore. It's a lot of different things. And maybe we need to learn to appreciate all of those different things and grow those rather than create a single spot, a single event or a single EDUCAUSE conference, right? Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Oh, that's worth a lot more than 2 cents. Thank you. That's I don't know if you had a chance to see it yet. We'll put up the videos of all of these next week. But last night, our FOECast discussion went into overdrive about some of the different ways this could work. And we created a ton of different imaginings about organizations that were more like scatter plots or more like clouds or more like heat maps. If you want, just check my blog post from early this morning and you'll see a quick, fantastic note about this. But I think you're absolutely right to embrace the web part of this. If you don't know DS-106, friends, it's a digital storytelling. it began as a kind of MOOC, but it's now something like a distributed social movement across teaching and learning. I put one link into it in the chat box, and you can see more. It's a very, very rich project, and in many ways, Todd, it inspired this week in how we structured the ideation exercise to have that small pieces loosely joined kind of architecture. But it may be that we have to get these small pieces a little more closely aligned in order to start sparking more ideas and more structure. Stay there for a second because we had two more questions that came up. Christopher, why don't you bring up the next one? If it's a video question. Let's see who we've got. We have Stephen Crawford. Excellent. And hello, Stephen. Can you hear us? Can't you? You're on mute. Not yet. Nothing yet. Well, Todd, you were just spared the terrifying prospect of being outflanked by two massive beards, which is, I know, a dangerous place to be. And we have Taylor. Oh, friends, Taylor has done yeoman work in trying to get all the different parts of FOECast running. Taylor has been a kind of a Squarespace ninja in getting that site going, and he's been very, very active and inspiring to everybody. So I'm really grateful to have Taylor involved. Hi, Taylor.
Hey there. Hear me all right?
Perfectly.
It's not often. I'm glad it wasn't Steven because now my beard feels secondary compared to
Your beard is awesome. Your beard is good.
I know we're running short on time. This could carry on in other places, I think. But I lost sleep last night after a little exchange with Maha Bali within Slack around just the concept of where the sort of critical lens gets placed. And her point was that typically reports such as Horizon Report really influences a lot of people and actually creates pretty big decisions and things move based on that at an institutional level. So I struggled with how something can exist that both says what is but also tries to project what ought to be. And I'll actually,
yes.
she wrote, I don't know if those that were in that chat, she, let me see if I can post her blog post. I'll get that in the chat. Anyway, she kind of expanded on this idea, but that's something I struggle with. I don't know sort of what I said the science versus the politics of it, but that's probably not quite right. But this idea just between saying what is and what the future, what these trends are saying the future is versus, having an actual influence and, creating real change and even bigger policy change that affects, wide swaths of people. No answer there, but it's a big question to think about, I think.
It is a big question. Thank you for pointing to Maha's blog post, which is really, really helpful. I'm so glad to have her involved. Again, we want to have this as transnational and diverse a conversation as possible. So having an instructional designer, technologist, and faculty member from Egypt participate is terrific. So I'm really glad. Again, Taylor, I just said some positive stuff about you because you've done an awful lot of work. Thank you. And this is a really important comment, especially the difference between predicting and prescribing. What we think is likely to happen versus what we would like to have happen. Stephen, can we hear from you?
I hope so.
Oh, great.
Oh, good. So, one of the things I was thinking about this process is that, the Horizon Report has kind of created a framework for how people think about things. And that framework, I think there's another framework that needs to be applied potentially in something that we do here with this, and that is to consider where different institutions may lie in that framework. So I think of Charles Graham, he did some writing on blended learning, and he identified 3 different types of institutions that showed where they were in their implementation of blended learning, whether they were, just experimenting, early adopters, or, a mature implementation. So I was thinking it could be interesting to have a matrix of some sort showing where certain innovations are and how prevalent they are in certain organizations at certain levels. I think about, in my question, I quoted the supposed quote by William Gibson that the future is already here, just unevenly distributed. And the reason for that is, even with my own institution here at Arizona State, while we hear of a number of great innovations that come out of this institution, a lot of them come out of an organization called Ed Plus, or it may come out of our College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. College of Nursing, we have a different funding. And so a lot of the things that they're doing, we'd love to do, but couldn't. But yet at the same time, we're doing something that they're not doing either. It's very uneven. And I think that could be a very interesting approach to consider, kind of how a matrix where different groups would how different things lay on that matrix.
Mhm.
I think about our community college friends as well, who have different funding levels too. So
Absolutely. And the U.S. has this enormous higher education framework with roughly 4,000 colleges and universities. And you think about research ones, you think of liberal arts colleges, you think of vocational schools, religious schools, military schools, community colleges. Very, very diverse strata. And of course, set off geographically in all kinds of places. So there's really, it's an excellent point to mention this. You're in Arizona right now, by the way, Steve?
I'm in Phoenix, where it's nice and cold. The temperature's only 57.
Whoa! Time for parkas in Phoenix. I know.
This is This is our second winter.
Oh, that's rough.
It actually rained 2 days ago.
You probably needed that. But this is a really important point. When I don't know if you had a chance to see this, but this keeps coming up when we talk about community. In many ways, there's the question of synthesis. Do we have a single unitary voice or a single unitary output? That was going back a bit. That was one of the values of the Horizon Report, was that it was a single document you could point to. It had one consensus statement. So do we want to repeat that because that has a certain value, or do we want to allow for multiplicity voices? So we talked about, for example, having minority reports. That is, the conclusion of the majority is this, but alongside it, we had people who say, no, it's actually that. Or do we help create some kind of space, some kind of environment where multiple projects, multiple voices can occur without any of them being the dominant or majority or minority point of view? Maybe that sounds really crazy ambitious, but maybe that's something that we can really try and hope for, if that makes sense. Stick around for a minute. Don't go away. I think we had one or two more questions left that had come in, and we're also almost out of time. We're coming up on 7 minutes before the end of the hour. Oh, wonderful. Kate Borowski asks, do people see this group as focusing more on the big questions or the admin level, or little questions, more everyday frontline worker bee type questions? That's a really good question, Kate. And so far, the answer has been yes. We've kind of been all over the place. Some have been saying we need to focus on that planetary view. Some say we need the micro view. Some say we need abstraction. Some say we need practice. It really goes back and forth, and it's really. It may be that we have to end up with some kind of consensus about this. Let me ask those of you who are here on the stage with me, Todd, Taylor, Stephen, what do you think? Should a project really focus on the macro or the micro level, or both? What do you think? It's a question of scope.
Yes.
We're both going to just start here. I always look macro, so I know. That's only a sort of selfish personal preference, because I think there's just more that can be said on the ground and at a micro level by identifying those macro trends. And I had to get this one involved for you, Brian, because I know we've had dogs involved in a few of these.
Thank you. I'm really glad to see the pup.
Selfish, but yeah, for me, the macro always feeds the micro, and I think there can be a lot of change that happens on a micro level, at institution level, once some of those macro trends are identified.
Oh, good point.
One of the things that maybe that we can do differently is, instead of putting out a document, you launch the report that gives that macro level, and then maybe there is, on a regular basis, different deeper dives that go more micro on different pieces of it. So let's say we identify 6 trends. So over the next 8 months, you release 6 reports that dive deeper after that macro report. That way, it's not I think that hey, you keep the buzz going more year round. You can then
Right.
kind of address some of the things I was talking about, some of the barriers, implementations, hit some of the micro things, and maybe even report on some of the things that have changed since that macro report came out and those intervening months that came out and those six, within, depending, which one goes first or last, and then you ramp up for the next one after that. So maybe that deeper dive post macro report is a way to look at it.
Oh, that's interesting. And if you look at it from a timeline, it may be a kind of syncopated thing where, here comes the macro publication, here come the micro publications, here comes the next macro, and so on. That's a real. Kate, it looks like people are really trying to embrace both options. Todd, did you want to chime in on this as well? Did you have a sense for macro mostly, micro mostly, or both?
I would definitely say that, and I don't even know what this means, but I think we still are focused on a thing, and we should be focused on a process. And so, I don't know how that looks in action. Like, how do you make that happen? But I definitely think that you throw the stone in the water and it ripples out. I mean, all the micro piece of it. As an educator working with teachers, policy does almost nothing. What I know is that it's this long, slow process of learning that is a process that takes a lot of time, that begins with just relationships. And I think that that's how I have learned to learn in my work is through relationships and communities and processes rather than um, books. And I don't mean books in a bad way, because I'm looking at all my favorite authors right here. Educational authors. That's one medium. Today, look at who we're talking. Look at who you have in here. I mean, this is maybe the process we need to wonder about and architect these spaces.
Well, thank you. That's a really powerful point. If you get a chance, Todd and Stephen, check out Tom Hames's blog post. He's a big fan of Stephen John's notions and theories about emergence and innovation, and he has a really interesting discussion about different types of organizations. I don't want to summarize it because I'm going to get some of the metaphors wrong. It's really elegant. Take a look at that. That might be it. It might be that FOECast becomes a process rather than a product, or a process that enables products, or a process that emits products. But process central it is. Friends, we're in the last 2 minutes of time. So what I want to do is, first of all, thank the heck out of you. My gosh, what a barrage of ideas and thoughts racing back and forth. It seems that the FOECast ideation space is a pretty welcome and rich one so far. We have a lot of different directions that we're going in. Let me point out tomorrow. This is a 5-day process this week. We're on day 4 right now. We're talking about scope. Tomorrow, we have a push to create mock ups of plans and prototypes. So the idea is that we're going to try by 24 hours from now or so to have, maybe 30 hours from now, to have some demos of what a process or a project could look like. So as Roxanne puts in the chat box, rapid prototyping day. So that's something I want you to think about. If this is interesting to you, to try this out tomorrow. I'll have a blog post about it tomorrow. The FOECast site will probably have a post about it. You'll see some more about this in the Google Doc, and join us. I mean, this is a brand new thing in many ways. We're really excited to try it. And let me again thank everybody for all of your comments and thoughts. But I need to point to next week beyond this, because we've had the week of FOECast, and next week we have another Future Transform with another guest and another topic. So Todd, Taylor, Stephen, let me thank you, and let me kick you off the stage so we can put up the slides that show you where next week is going.
Thank you, Brian.
This is so exciting. So next, I want you to bear in mind a few different things for you to consider. So once we finish up this week of mad ideation, there's a few different ways where we could go. So to begin with, our guest next week is the author of an extraordinarily controversial book. This is someone I'm really, really looking forward to seeing. Brian Kaplan not only has the best first name of anybody on earth, obviously, but his book is called The Case Against Education. or he has an interesting argument about why education as we've structured it is a bad idea, and it's a bad value proposition. He's not anti-intellectual. He's a professor of economics. He has instead a very detailed analysis that's immensely provocative. I really, really recommend this. He's a very fast, rapid thinker. We'll have a great conversation. So please come by next week for that. Also, we are just finishing up our book club. We had this week was the last post about Soonish. If you haven't had a chance to read it, it's a delight. It's an illustrated book, partly comics, about 10 technologies that look likely to be enormously important in the future. So if you haven't had a chance to read into it or you just started, please plunge in and keep going because it's a real treat. And pretty soon we'll have our next book club title. So if you're interested in that, you might want to think about it. Also, speaking of books, if you'd like to get some books either for yourself, for your library, for your classes, last week we launched a bookstore just for books about the future of education and technology. Nothing like it on earth right now. So please go there, give the authors a little love, and I think you'll find it a really intriguing selection. Now, beyond that, if that's not enough to keep you occupied, if you're still at loose ends, you can find out more about the FTTE report by going to ftte.us. You can find out more about this technology by going to shindig.com. In the meantime, please have a great day. Thank you for participating, and onward with FOECast. Bye-bye.